無限界内し無 Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have a returning good brother into the temple. Coming to us from Adventure Slang Productions, the developer of the Nuovarden RPG, which has finally gotten out into the wild completely. It is available on DriveThruRPG. The link to that is in the description on YouTube, and let me put it up there on Twitch for those watching there. But the one and only Ty Moore, also known as Dungeon Master Ty. How you doing today, man?
Hello. Hey, Mildred. Thanks for having me back. Nice chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you for coming back. We had decided to do this because we both ended up putting out our particular projects around the same time. Give or take a few weeks, obviously. But last time I had you on, it was shortly after the beta had launched, and you know it was a case of a lengthy affair because you had originally tried to do Nuovarden on Kickstarter,
Right.
then GameFound, and then eventually just releasing the thing fully on DriveThruRPG after having it on your site for a little while. So between that time and now, what were some of the big things that happened?
That's an interesting question. I mean, it went into, when the beta came out, it was sort of a home. Erin, my daughter, did the layout for the beta and did a really nice job. And then the full thing got pulled together and went into layout in 24. So it took a couple of years just to get it all tested and brought together. And then again, layout took probably all told about 9 months, I think. And so then it dropped. And in that time, it was just, I think it was developing more solidly in my mind, because the interesting thing about it with my own system as well, the fortune system, was understanding really completely what we had done. I think I had an intuitive sense of what the D4 system or the Fortunes D4 system would be. And then when it was actually fully done and being used, and I've been using it regularly now, it just continued to give me a return that I didn't fully realize we had managed to accomplish or capture, if you know what I mean. So, so things like player combos and player agency. Player agency was always at the forefront of importance on that. But with the way that it actually came together, it's it's been a lot of fun for me to watch it with my players. Live stream at conventions, everything, the way that they integrate that freedom and flexibility.
I can certainly get that. Now, I think for a fair few people, this will be their first time hearing about Nuovarden. So one of the things I'd like to get into is what you would consider some of the games' Appendix N to be. The books, films, whatnot that serve as both inspiration as well as a kind of reference to build on. Hence why I referenced Appendix N there.
Yeah. I think I'll start with Castlevania as far as kind of the visuals go. For Nuovarden doesn't have magic; it has manifestation. But the way, in Castlevania, I don't remember the character's name. There's the couple that go around killing monsters, and she's like a magician or something. She throws up all these Yeah, it's like, yeah. And she throws up these radiant, like shields and these raining spikes and things like that.
Hmm.
That was a visual that I really liked that influenced the affected area mechanic in the game. So as you become more powerful, your area grows. You can do, you can fill that area, and it's not like outrageously different from other area of effect types of mechanics, but it does grow with the power of the individual, and I just wanted to capture that kind of dynamic. So Castlevania, as far as like the pyrotechnics,
Yeah.
and then Avatar: The Last Airbender is a good point of reference, especially in terms of like the Lenai Elemental effect
Hmm.
and some of the pyrotechnics that are involved there. I'm not saying that I'm a huge Airbender fan, but I do think that there's a good point of connection there.
Hmm.
And then like Monster Hunter, because it's a garden setting, and it's a garden setting full of creatures that have changed along with the people that are there. So you never know what kind of bizarre creature you might run up against.
Hmm.
And you know, people can actually spend time hunting them, sort of a la Skyrim, if they wanted to just have a career, you know, as a hunter harvester. In fact, there are factions that do the same thing within the rules. So Monster Hunter, Castlevania, Avatar, and then I just kind of, as I consumed the media, just kind of cherry picked in ways of like, oh, how would this work in the game, and then adjusting the rules a little bit to make it happen. So if people are imagining, you know, they're visualizing something that they've seen somewhere else, they're like, oh, I want my character to do that, or I want my character to be that kind of hero within the context of the setting, of course.
Hmm.
Then the rules allow for that.
Oh yeah, I can certainly get that. And when it comes to the visual style of Novarden, uh, I I may have mentioned back when we did the first interview that there was a lot of DNA of of more pulpy sword and planet style of fantasy.
Hmm.
You know, especially came to mind is the likes of John Carter, i.e. the Barsoom Saga.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So it's interesting that you mentioned planetary, which is there's a little bit of distinction there because Nuovarden as a setting technically is not a planet; it's a dimension. And I don't think that's exactly what you're talking about. It's not like planet hopping or anything like that. But
No.
it is very dimensional and dimension crossover and dimension hopping.
Hmm.
But it has that garden aspect, you know, so sort of like the Lost Garden, the because it ultimately became defined as an earthpunk setting. It's not medieval. It's more of a nature oriented Bronze Age kind of thing, but it's Bronze Age technology with fantasy elements. So there's like rumors of airships and lost gearworks technology and
In that regard,
underground.
there
Yeah.
is a term that I've used to describe certain console style RPGs that I think is applicable here, and that
Mm.
is Gestalt fantasy.
Uh, how could you define that a little further?
Gestalt fantasy is a term that I've used to refer to fantasy settings or games or whatnot that aren't really focused in one particular genre of fantasy, but are taking from a bunch of different things and creating a combined whole. You know,
Gotcha.
based on things. The name, of course, is based on the whole Gestalt theory that's in graphic design. You know, pretty sure you've seen a Gestalt triangle, even though the triangle doesn't exist. You know,
Yeah.
the one that your mind makes the triangle just by looking at the wedge shapes.
Gotcha.
Um, and I've used this to refer to the fact that if you look at your Final Fantasies, your Tales of, or the like, despite them having a lot of high fantasy trappings, they also have elements that are not in high fantasy integrated within them.
Right.
And Gestalt was my way of referencing that fact.
Gotcha.
You know,
Yeah.
especially since when you're dealing with a lot of media in East Asia, there's this pattern of genre being looked at as continuum rather than a strict category.
Mm. Hmm.
And I think that's something
Right.
to consider.
And so you're seeing that in Nuovarden, and I think that you're right. I think because what I was doing when I first came up with this setting, which uh, I've said many times came out of a dream, literally. Um, so I came up with this setting, and I felt like it was important because the setting is foreign or alien enough
Hmm.
that it needs touchstones of recognition or familiarity for new uh, users because it's not like like we were just saying, it's not dwarves and elves and wizards and knights and castles and kings and things like that.
Hmm.
It's a different setting. But your comment on Gestalt fantasy, this idea that there are those elements of high fantasy, and they're like armor, swords, the martial types, the caster types, things like that,
Hmm.
do have a veneer, a presence in here. And it's because it is a fantasy. So it is an adventure set fantasy. I mean, it's exploration. That's the primary verb that I apply to it.
Oh yeah.
Uh, but it does have those like unknown world, lost technology, forgotten, ruins aspect as much as it has the now, which is just as much a mystery as the lost past. Uh, which is an aside to what we're talking about. But yeah, those overlapping elements of familiarity that help guide the new adopter into Nuovarden were important to me, and that's deliberate.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's equally important, and this is something that I've been seeing more and more over the last decade or so. It was already present. I'm just seeing more of it when it comes to the games that people make.
Mhm.
There's been a lot of emphasis over the years of having it that the setting and the mechanics are married to each other, as opposed
Uh-huh.
to a set of mechanics that could be used for any setting or vice versa. Um, and you kind of have that with the fact that a lot of what's here is built for New Barden in particular.
Mhm.
Um, Especially things like manifestations and disciplines.
Right. It's interesting that you bring that up because I'm currently working on a new setting that is a different genre using the fortune system. And it does need to be customized to that genre in some regards. For example, I'm keeping disciplines because that's just a catch all term for your skill set.
Okay.
But I'm not doing manifestations the way that they're done in Nuovarden because it's a real world setting, it's a modern setting, and the mystical element belongs in a much narrower context for that new setting. So the disciplines then just become the way to accomplish your mundane feats of firing a gun or getting in a fist fight or driving a car or whatever. So I mean, I wanted a system in the fortune system that was flexible enough to apply to other genres, and it excites me that it still has to be customized for the setting to sort of hybridize that marriage of setting and system
Yeah.
as a unit. Yeah,
I
that's a neat observation.
Yeah, and I suppose obviously some of the disciplines um might have to be renamed or taken a different approach. Things like elements, if you're doing a more modern
Mm.
setting,
Right.
um
Yeah.
wouldn't wouldn't quite fit. Um, but what it reminds me of is, oddly enough, World of Darkness.
Mm.
And I know that might be strange, but this is more in the fact that each of the games in World of Darkness has their own set of mechanics for the supernatural element within them. You
Mm.
have the different disciplines and the like for the different vampire clans. In Vampire, for instance, you have the different different types of kindred, not kindred, the different types of werewolf and werewolf. You have the different styles of magic in mage, and all of them completely busted, but that's another story. Even in something like Exalted, the Exalted outside of the Solar, who are supposed to be just slightly better than average at everything, have some sort of system that's unique to them. The Sidereals have the astronomy system. You have the Dragon-blooded have their team play effects, and even though it's using a lot of the same framework, the charms, for instance, which is the most common feature across different exalts, they're not used the exact same for everyone, even if they may have the same name, like Ox Body Technique, has different benefits based on what type of exalt you're dealing with, and each of them have some sort of drawback that take them in what's known as the Great Curse, that reflects a certain theme. The point is that even though there's some similar DNA, it's not one where it overlaps completely.
I think theme is a key term there that you just mentioned. I think that for me as a creator, thematic unity is really important, especially in a setting like Nuovarden, because it helps inform the world and player understanding. Now, of course, there's a lot of lore in there as well, but I call it an Earthpunk setting, and I'm currently working on several standalone adventures, and they all have a tie to the land in their title that makes it Earthpunk, right? So the theme of Earthpunk is consistent, and I think that that's really important.
Yeah. Now,
for unity,
if you were to give a elevator pitch as to what Earthpunk entails compared to other types of punk and storytelling, what would that elevator pitch be?
Essentially, Earthpunk is the land itself plays a role, and it can be adversary or ally. And so when the character is engaging in the environment is an aspect of interaction, maybe in a more direct sense than just like a rock fall or a natural trap or something like that. And part of this is how it ties in with manifestation. The manifestation energy isn't sentient, but it has kind of an intent or an intention, and it works with the land so that the land is very much a vibrant presence in the setting.
Yeah.
And that would be the absolute, that's the absolute nutshell version of it. But definitely the elements, the nature, have a substantial presence.
And I'd say because a lot of people, when they think of blank punk, obviously they think of things like cyberpunk, but I will go out on a limb, and this might be a case of a hot take, even though I've been consistent with this. I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding of cyberpunk.
I'm interested because that's my favorite subgenre of science fiction, so lay it on me.
Well, the best way I can describe it is I think a lot of people's understanding of cyberpunk is rooted in the 1980s. Rooted in 1980s style futurism, i.e. what futurists in the 80s were predicting the future to look like based on what was present at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always a lot of things that people think needs to be in cyberpunk, I'm not convinced they have to be. Like I've been told many times that you need to have that late stage corporate dystopia for something to be cyberpunk. Now, there's not, and I've always felt that leaned a little bit into design by gospel. We do things a certain way because we've always done things a certain way, but not asking ourselves why we're doing it that way.
Yeah.
And the way I've always described cyberpunk is a marriage between two factors, combining the technophobic and the technophilic. That particular mixture of how people view technology, as well as the idea of technology being street level. That customizing and messing around with tech is something that is, in one form or another, commonplace. If I were to use a real-world parallel, consider the import tuner subculture. That's been popularized through things like the Initial D anime and some of the other anime that guy has done because he's a natural gearhead. But the point,
I'm just sorry, didn't mean.
But the point is that what some insist that you have to do. I'm not entirely sure if that's the case or if it's people have just talked themselves into thinking you have to.
So as you mentioned that, I'm trying to imagine cyberpunk without that corporate dystopia and the corporate control and the weakening of government and all that kind of stuff. And wondering, I'm just wondering, I don't know, I'd have to think about it, if that sort of informs a subgenre of cyberpunkism.
Well, I think of some of the cyberpunk we got out of Japan that isn't really doing that kind of story. I mean, everybody brings up Ghost in the Shell as a cyberpunk work. One could argue it's more transhumanist than cyberpunk, but it's not really doing that same corporate dystopia. Not in the same way as say Cyberpunk 2020 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's more about the reaction to an explosion of technology. Since in the 1980s you had this explosion of consumer tech, you had people largely getting over the fear of plastic that dominated a good amount of the 70s. That's the reason why some cars and some equipment had those useless wood panels.
Yeah.
Is because there was a fear of plastic around that time. Even Doctor Who tackled that with the living plastic story that was Pertwee's first story. But I look at it as parallel to the notion that a lot of people have that regarding fantasy, that you need to have the castles and stuff, a very Western European pastiche.
Yeah.
And
yep.
I've been of the belief that if you want to do that, that's fine, but you don't have to.
I agree.
And
yeah,
saying that one has to without providing a strong enough reason, aside from tradition, I don't think is sufficient.
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting challenge though, because so Nuovarden is a very cohesive fantasy setting, and I think about it in terms of other fantasy style IPs that I've seen, like the Cameron Avatar, or certain other depictions of other.
Is more science fiction than anything else, though.
It's science.
Sword and Planet.
Yeah, well, the reason why I think of it the reason why I point it in terms of fantasy is because if you take away the imperialist invader and their technology, the native people of Avatar are more fantasy oriented. They're exotic, they live in a naturalistic environment, they use more rudimentary technology, things like that.
Yeah, I'd say when it comes to the Na'vi, I would say that they have more of a parallel to something that Edgar Rice Burroughs would write.
Would you consider that fantasy though? Still,
Um,
in a broad sense.
I would consider it in a I would consider it a more primal form of it. Maybe even pulpy.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And that's also why I brought up. I didn't come up with the term sword and planet, but it has been used to refer to those kind of extra dimensional places that are still they're doing sword and sorcery, but there's elements of science fiction parts to it.
Right.
And John Carter is definitely a case of that. You have energy weapons in addition to having people dressing in trappings that are very fantasy leaning, even though
Yeah.
there's not really any magic to speak of in John Carter.
Mhm.
Not in the typical sense. Though there is one RPG that I'm curious if anyone brought up to you when it came to discussing Nuovarden, and that is RuneQuest.
I believe that has been mentioned, but I don't know enough about RuneQuest to know the comparison.
RuneQuest is a very Bronze Age style of fantasy, and very much built around its world, especially regarding the magic system being tied to the titular runes. It's also a very strange setting where the world is on a stellar ocean, but the world is more of a cube than a sphere.
Okay.
Because it's what happens when you have a game designed by someone who was very much a shaman.
Oh, okay.
Also, sentient ducks is one of the races, because why not?
I wonder if Vaesen draws from that then.
Not necessarily. Vaesen is very much Nordic horror.
Or what am I thinking of? Maybe I'm thinking of Dragonbane. That's what I'm thinking of.
Now, Dragonbane drawing from it, that I could see, because, RuneQuest is the patient zero for the basic role-playing system. The D100 thing you also see in Call of Cthulhu. And a fantasy version of that system made its way over to Sweden, which would eventually become Drakar Dimma. That is very bad Swedish, but translated to Dragons and Demons, which would eventually become Dragonbane.
There you go.
So that I could see. Obviously, I don't have any concrete evidence of that, but there's enough circumstantial to where I can say, yeah, this adds up.
It makes a lot of sense to me because I always thought that the ducks in Dragonbane just sort of came out of left field.
Well, remember the tagline for Dragonbane: "Mirth and Mayhem."
Yeah, true.
That in the visual style of Dragonbane is very comic book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I could see that being in a fantasy comic book more than a fantasy novel.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
Not to dismiss one or the other; they're just different energies.
Right.
And I've talked with a few other people, and one big thing that everybody's brought up is when it comes to having some sort of supernatural system, making sure that it has its rules established and fits the world. I wonder if some of that is a reaction to the wishy-washy nature of the Vancian model in D&D.
Yeah, interesting observation. What are your anchor points on that thought?
Because I've made one thing clear over the years. I've never liked the Vancian model in D&D. I didn't like it when I started out as a little kid. I started out when I was 10, so and I still don't like it. And there are multiple reasons as to why I don't. Um, the one that I want to focus on for this is the fact that I don't have an in-universe reason for why it exists. I have out-of-universe reasons, like the writers being a fan of the Dying Earth books, but that's an out-of-universe reason. Whereas I look at the magic system and or even psionic systems in so many different games, and I have a in-universe understanding of why the mechanics work that way. You know, why is it that Perils of the Warp is a chart that you might have to roll for in Warhammer? Well, it's because all magic is chaos magic, and messing with chaos can lead to bad things. Anytime you cast a spell in Warhammer, you are playing with metaphorical and literal fire. Why do you only have so many spells you can get in Legend of the Five Rings? Well, it's because you're entreating elemental kami to perform a service for you, and you can only do that so much.
I guess it's fair to say that D&D is based so heavily, especially the original, on the literature that was available at the time and the mythology that came out of religion, came out of cultural traditions, things like that, that it adopted this format and just overlaid it, and it has stuck.
Which is fine, but within the again, it comes back to out of universe. Those are all out of universe explanations.
Yeah.
And yeah, some of this is due to the fact that D&D has been wishy-washy about whether or not it has a setting. And I've been of the belief that you've got to pick a lane when it comes to that. You either have a setting and you build around that, or you build around being agnostic. Or if you want to instead have a particular theme instead of a setting, like something like Call of Cthulhu doesn't have a setting per se, but it has a theme of the world circa the 1920s.
As a setting,
yeah, that is its equivalent, but it builds everything around that.
Right, as opposed to Greyhawk being separate from Faerun, being separate from wherever.
And of course, there's also the fact that if I ask what the default setting of D&D is to 5 people, I would get 5 different answers.
Right.
And which answer is the right one is not relevant. It's the fact that you get 5 different answers that's the problem.
It's really just based on the tradition of where they came in and what they played in.
Yeah.
As their point of
And that whole thing of having to prepare your spells and then having to rememorize them after an 8-hour rest. I don't know why in the settings that is a thing.
So I know that D&D has the weave, the magic weave, and it's like this weird geometric shape that wraps around the world, and
they never say that in any of the books. Or any
do
of the
they not?
Books.
I've never paid attention.
I think there's been some hintings here and there in some of the early core books, but it is not outright stated. It's in that same playing halfsies kind of thing.
And this is probably why we get such a broad flavor. It's not even I don't know if it's a flavor. It's not a flavor. It's just a broad sampling of flavors in D&D, where you can kind of pick and choose what type of fantasy you want to play, or you can just throw it all together and everybody can be anything from an intelligent hippopotamus to a human being. And I think what I'm hearing you say though is there are things that I agree with as well, that I like a more unified and thematic setting. Just as basically plain and simple what we're talking about, the difference there. And that's why in Nuovarden, the magic system is manifestation. It's an energy that not that anyone controls, but that they can tap into and attempt to use. And it may or may not work for them.
I suppose an analogy I could use with manifestations is it is akin to sailing, in the sense that you can take advantage of the way the wind is blowing, but you can't control it.
Right.
Same thing.
Yes.
Same
Yeah.
thing with, you can understand how to take advantage of the currents in a body of water, but you're not going to be able to control where those currents are going.
Yeah. Yeah. And my friend Tim equates it to like the drinking from a fire hose analogy. You're just going to try to tap in and get what you can out of it before, you know, smashes you in the face. You have to turn off the source or get
Yeah,
away from it.
yeah, because I've seen what happens with things that get hit by fire hoses. You do not want to be in the splash zone.
No.
Uh, and obviously, the way chi is handled in a lot of wuxia tales is not far removed from that. And
Hmm.
ostensibly, Avatar is a wuxia piece.
Uh-huh.
Uh, it it's not one by outright intent, but in terms of theming, it's a case of, if the boot fits, you may as well wear it.
Right. And we have to recognize that creators draw from certain aspects of things that they know. You know,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure that somewhere in my psyche, chi is an aspect of the focus or the attempt to manifest, because that's what, when you're meditating, that's what you're doing. You're focusing on your energy.
Yeah, there's an
Similar
entire
idea.
there's an entire subtype of that style of storytelling that focuses a lot on that, called cultivation. And people who cultivate sufficient amounts of chi are able to do these extra normal things.
Right. Yeah, similar concept.
Mhm.
Or just pure spiritual manifestation, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know if positivism is necessarily an aspect of it, but the idea that they're like collective conscious and things like that. Those are themes that subtly run through Nuovarden because they subtly run through me.
Yeah. And I'd say, obviously building that kind of thing around elements, especially the Hellenistic elements, is an easy thing for people to get behind. But I think one of the more interesting things that I remember pointing out when I covered the beta was the fact that you're using D4s. Was that just a means of simplifying, or just giving a die that doesn't get a lot of use some use?
There were a couple, 2 or 3 probably intentions there. One of them being that it stands out as unique. But I also wanted to see if I could build a system that was robust without being too heavy for the narrative, because I like narrative-driven games, and so I wanted a system that offered dynamism, and I hoped to avoid broad swinginess, and ultimately I think it was achieved, because your percentages are not all that different between a D4 and a D20 if you build it a certain way. And in the base percentage of success with a single D4 obviously is 25%.
Mhm.
With the meta currency of primacy and 2 dice, it goes up near 80%. And yet there's still that margin of error that consistently shows up. But I found that in what I was hoping to do and what the outcome was, there's a lot of player excitement because there is a strong sense of heroism, and failure means something beyond just a dead stop.
Yeah,
There are very few instances. Yeah, go ahead.
there's been the concept of fail forward um, over the years.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I don't know when the concept was first introduced, but the general rule with how fail forward is described is a failed roll does not necessarily mean a narrative stop.
Right. Right. In Nuovarden, I have a fail forward option for the seer, the GM. But I think what works more dynamically for the fortune system is the recovery mechanic in the fortune system. That is your double. So quickly, success in Nuovarden in the fortune system is a 4 on the die. It's on the die face. So not a total of 4, but a 4 on the die face. If you're rolling 2 dice, you have your chance at doubles. And doubles are always beneficial in some way. Double 4s is your high or critical success. Double 2s and double 3s are not the 4 for success, but they offer what we call recovery. And recovery allows you to take a sort of a consolation benefit, which is you either are recovering injury, you're healing, or you're improving your armor factor, or you are invoking a status support or removing a status impediment from or to yourself. And sometimes that allows you to still succeed. So let's say I want to leap across this chasm, and my roll is not the 4 for success, but I get doubles and I can take the status effect mobilize, and it increases my distance. So arguably I could have stretched to make the leap, or I'm trying to escape a wrestle, and I don't get the 4 on the die, but I get that mobilize again. I get the doubles that allow me to mobilize out of it. So there are multiple ways to get success, or a side success that isn't exactly what I tried to do. And then the player doesn't walk away feeling like, well, that was dumb. Which many of us have experienced with other systems where you have advantage, say in D&D, and then you roll 2 5s. Horrible. What a horrible thing.
Oh yeah. And on one hand, I've always said the dice gods are merciless. The dice gods hate everyone equally.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it is kind of deflating when somebody rolls well on the setup and rolls poorly on the follow through, so the result is poor.
Yeah.
I was talking with the guy behind Young Gods, and that is very much a channeling a lot of the DNA of World of Darkness and trying to avoid some of the pitfalls therein. Brendan Carlson, and I brought up how deflating it is when you get a bunch of dice that you roll to really, really succeed, but then when you roll damage and about 2/3 of those dice miss. So you hit, but you did absolute trash for damage.
Right. Yeah.
Think of those cases where I remember this was one thing that I would help that during my 3rd edition days I house ruled the hell out of just because I hated it. Crit confirming.
I've not heard that term.
In 3rd edition, if you rolled a nat 20, obviously that'd be a critical. You do it on an attack, you have to roll again to confirm the crit, and that determines whether or not you're doing max damage or double damage. You crit a second time, you get double damage.
Interesting.
Nobody I know liked it. Everybody.
Well, it's what my friends and I sometimes refer to as fiddly.
Yeah.
Like it's fun to roll dice, but you don't want to just have to roll and roll and roll just to figure out if you succeeded. Just roll and see if you succeeded, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I certainly have some cases of rolling a bunch of times, but it's usually a case of not. The first one is whether or not you succeed. Everyone after that is whether or not you succeed more. Like I say, to shift to to Legend Edition.
Mhm.
As an example, the monk job has blitzes. Um, the idea with a blitz is it is essentially you're attacking 3 times. You're not doing additional damage, but the degree of effect is increased depending on whether or not you get 1, 2, or 3 successes against your target.
Okay.
So and in some cases you might get extra damage, but there's only like a couple of forms that do that.
Gotcha.
And of course, every time you use a blitz, you're getting a point of the chopper resource, which you can use on mudras, and the loop continues.
So this just brings to mind a little bit of curiosity. I know that the system is D20 plus ND6. How does that combo work? What's the mechanic there?
We had written it as D20 and D6 for simplicity's sake on the itch page, but it is using the full range of dice. A lot of the core mechanics are going to be familiar. It is the reason why we said the D6 thing is we've added in the boon and bane system that was used in Shadow of the Demon, where instead of like a +2 or a -2 modifier, it is you gain a boon or a bane. When you roll the D20, you roll the number of D6s equal to the boons and banes, and take the highest D6. And if it's boons, you add that to the result. If it's banes, you subtract it from the result. And of course,
Gotcha.
boons and banes cancel each other out on a one-to-one basis.
So whatever the majority result is what you go with.
Yeah. So if you got 1 boon and 1 bane, you don't have either.
Right. Straight roll.
Yeah. You can, on the other hand, trade them to temporarily expand your crit range or botch range. A +1 for every 2 that you trade. But if you do it, it's an all or nothing thing. You have to trade all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we say it's a D20 and D6 based affair.
Gotcha.
And a lot of the different effects will say that they grant a boon or that you suffer a bane. So it's in that particular vein.
So the design mentality for the system. Tell me a little bit more about that. What was important to you as a designer to capture, and what were you trying to avoid in terms of systems that you've looked at before and didn't want or wanted?
Well,
if that's fair to say.
We have a set of pillars that we established in the first chapter of the book, and those things are mythos oversetting, customization is king, and the 4-phase structure. Those are kind of our 3 pillars that everything reflects around. Now, mythos oversetting is the reflection of the fact that we're not building around any one entry in the series, but rather the recurring elements in the mythos that has been built around the series is what we're building. Customization is king is just the customization level that we go with on the player and GM side. Because I felt that there was a way to do customization without going full point-based freeform, which has its own drawbacks. I know some people romanticize that in the sense of you can do just about anything with it. which technically speaking, yeah, you can, but practically speaking, it creates a certain amount of high floor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
and when it comes to, it also creates certain traps, certain beginners traps, or the ivory tower thing that Monty Cook was infamous for back in third edition. What what I wanted to showcase is being able to do customization in more of a mix and match modular approach rather than full point buy. Um, Now there is a point-based approach when it comes to monster creation, which before I wrote any monsters, I wrote a monster creation system and then built 200 pre-gens off of that. And I've had to tell people the monster entries in the in the in the bestiary are not the be-all end-all in regard to how you design your adversaries.
Right.
I.e.,
Well, I mean, I think. Yeah.
i.e., the version of the imp that I have in the book it doesn't have to be the one you make.
Right. I think this is where customization for the player is really satisfying. And I did the same thing with Nuovarden. I've got a format for creating creatures, as I do for creating items of power and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what's presented here is the start. Now here's here's the method for balance or for fitting for you to continue to create things for your needs and for your setting and for your experience as the player, because it should be near infinite.
Yeah,
and it will be because the needs will change based on the uniqueness of the story that you're telling or the adventure that you're running.
pretty much. There's also the fact that I wanted to have multi-classing, the traditional sense, be something that is more than just a side thing, which is I say the reason why multi-classing in games that have class systems tends to not work as well, because it isn't built with it from the get-go.
Right. I'm with you there because I informally say that the Nuovarden fortune system is a default multi-class because you're gaining disciplines outside of your initial. So it's, there aren't classes in Nuovarden. There are cultures and there are disciplines, but the disciplines are where you get your abilities, your powers, those sorts of things that are in some systems are compartmentalized and some systems are unified. In Nuovarden, they're essentially unified. You have the term body, and then everything that associates with the physical form falls underneath that discipline. If you start with body, later, when you get more powerful, you may pick up something like element or technology or lore or something like that is going to further inform your character's unique focus. And it also sort of infers that multi-classing because they're dipping into other abilities now that they didn't necessarily have access to before.
Yeah, I'd say the way you've described disciplines to me and the way you have it set up, I might have a bit of brain rot given recent developments, but I'd say it has more in common with the classes as skill package approach that is done by Swordworld. Now, if you're not familiar, Swordworld is a game that I've talked about quite a bit on my channel, but it is the largest homegrown TTRPG out of Japan, and instead of you picking a class, you're spending XP on levels in classes, almost like skill packages.
Gotcha.
And
it's a little different. it's a little different in Nuovarden in the fortune system. Oh, actually, it's actually quite a bit different because what your point, you do get points when you evolve, but you're putting those in your primary pools. That being your injury scale and your primacy. And your primacy is again your meta currency. Where you are getting your packages is in the discipline, and the package is the entirety of that. So there are 8. Right? There's body, mind, lore, mystery, silent song, technology, element, and they pretty much encompass all of quote unquote reality.
Yeah,
and then we.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I forgot that it was a case of you either got it or you don't. It's an on-off switch. But the other thing
unless it's mundane.
Yeah, the other thing I bring up regarding that is that the fun factor when it comes to character builds, and this is something that's in Legend Edition as much as it is in Nuovarden from what I've seen, is the combination of those elements.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of the mix and match, plug and play kind of build where it gives you combinations, and it probably, I don't think I'll say that. That what it does is allows an intellectual conceptualization of diversity of build, because you may have, I'm looking, like at Legend, you've got a lot of options there that you can choose from.
Yes.
In Nuovarden, the options are more inferred, and you may lean into one discipline more than another, and because your character is a character, has a personality, and so you are crafting the persona of that character based on the discipline. So 2 characters may have the same discipline package, and they may play them totally differently.
Yeah, there is a similar thing. Someone could, because of the combination of elements, not just your race, jobs and class, but even things like feats and magic items. You could have somebody two characters with the same jobs, the same class, who don't play the same.
Right.
Especially since you'll be able to see it much further on in the book, but I don't have a set weapon list.
That's an interesting observation. How do you treat weapons, just for everyone's nutshell benefit here?
I've talked about this before, but the approach I've taken is a kind of tag-based system. Weapons are created. Everybody has a custom weapon that they make out of the gate that is built on 3 steps. The first is meta type, whether it's a physical or an arcane weapon, i.e. if it's using your physical combat modifier, which the stat that uses can depend on your choice of class, or your magical combat modifier, and whether it's the weapon attacks target physical or magical defense.
Gotcha.
The template is essentially whether it's a light, medium, or heavy weapon. There's some you could do one-handed, some you could do hand and a half, or some you need 2 hands for. Essentially, there's a set of templates in that style for melee and ranged. The difference between them is the base damage die, as well as how it uses what we call the extra effort. Extra effort is a way to do additional damage, but when rolling high, because for every few points based on a threshold that your attack beats defense, you add 1d4 in damage. Light weapons, so things with the close template or the point blank template for melee and range respectively, have 1d6 for their damage die. You get additional damage die every few levels, and have an extra effort at threshold of 3. So 1 more d4 every 3 points you beat defense. Whereas something like Great does 1d10 damage, but has an extra effort threshold of 5. So essentially, light weapons can do a lot of damage, but they can't do it consistently. whereas heavy weapons have a higher floor for damage but a lower ceiling.
No.
And the third part is 3 tags. These are kind of the equivalent of keywords you might see for weapons in other settings. You know, if you want your weapon to be doing fire damage, that's what the elemental tag is for. If you want it to do more consistent, have a higher floor with its damage rolls, that's what the brutal tag is for.
Got it.
If you want to pierce defense, that's what the magnum tag is for. You're picking 3 tags, and all but a couple of them can only be picked once. The exception to that is brutal, which can be taken up to 3 times. It just means that the first time you take brutal, when you roll damage die, if you roll 1s, you re-roll. You do it twice, it's 1s and 2s. You do it 3 times, it's 1, 2s, and 3s.
Gotcha.
And that's specifically for the weapon damage die, not extra effort.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at the chart here too and following along with what you're saying.
Yeah, so even though we have a weapon list technically, it is a collection of potential examples about what your setup could look like if you wanted to emulate certain weapons.
Yeah. Nice.
Some of them are from the games, and some I just had some fun with, like putting in a 3-section staff because why not? Or putting in
yeah.
the weapon cloak because the idea of it, because I think I was watching a rerun of the cape at one point, and the idea of a weaponized cape was something I wanted to explore.
Yeah, exactly. This is where we take things from other media and we're like, okay, I'm gonna put that in my thing because it's cool.
Or things like a chainsaw, because why not? Also because I'm a big fan of the Evil Dead movies. In fact, there's a Last Chance Theater near where I live that every Halloween does a Evil Dead marathon. You know, going through the original 3 movies. Midway through, they'll do an intermission where you can get up and stretch while they play trailers from around that time. So for things like Crawl or the original Alien, because sitting down for 3 movies back to back is going to make your mind and ass numb.
Yeah, we're well past Wagner these days.
Mm-hmm. If you're sitting through 3 full movies like that, you're approaching swamp ass territory.
Yeah, and other health issues.
Mm-hmm. But the reason why and that's not even getting into the point-based approach with magic items, which adds another layer of customization. And the reason I did this was I wanted to avoid being Sisyphus. I remember listening to an interview that Brandon Sanderson did. Now, the guy behind Stormlight Archive, Mistborn, basically the whole Cosmere universe. Looking forward to cracking open the Cosmere RPG that came out last week.
What's out now? Okay.
Yeah, I got my PDF copies. I'm not getting the physical copies for at least a few more months, which I knew was going to happen. But he was talking about how he came up with the idea of the shard blades in Stormlight Archive. And he cited the Buster Sword in FF7 as one of his major inspirations. Which, since shard blades are oversized great swords for the most part, yeah, there's certainly that. But one of the things he said was he wanted to have a weapon that would have the same cool factor as when people first saw the Buster Sword in 1997, or first saw the lightsaber in 1977. And what I took out of that is, at some point in the future, I don't know when or what form it's going to take, someone's going to come up with an IP that has some kind of weapon or armor that has that same cool factor. And people are going to want to bring that into their games. So this modular approach to weapon and armor creation, and just equipment creation in general, is my way of smoothing that along. So that somebody isn't just creating out of whole cloth. They have a foundation to build with.
Right, right. And that brings to mind for me as a designer, one of the important factors is to build the balance comes from you get this power with a limitation, and you get this ability at the cost of this other balancing factor, so that it's not all, because one of the things we don't want to do is throw out there, at least formally, something that's super overpowered with no limitations, because in a way that's not fun in its own right, and it just feels kind of, from a professional perspective, it just feels kind of amateur. So we want to have those structures,
Yeah, I like
but
risk
we
reward
still want the
systems.
cool. Hmm.
I like risk reward systems, and I definitely put a lot of that in this. Obviously, with weapon creation, the drawback is you're taking some things and you're not getting the other things. Um,
Right. Yeah.
with the way I handle spells, for instance, no matter how you build your character, there's going to be more spells that you can potentially get or potentially use than you're actually going to be able to use. Because I do
Right.
have a kind of spell slot system, and even for most people, for most people, they're only going to be able to carry less than a dozen spells, even at high levels. The exception to that rule is blue magic. But much like in the video games, you're not getting blue magic by leveling up. You got to go out and find it. Usually involving getting hit by by blue spells or studying monsters that have them. If you have blue magic does not have that slot restriction. But it has the restriction of the fact that what blue spells you have access to is going to be much more dependent on your GM and what monsters they throw at you. And speaking of that whole benefit and drawback thing, this same sort of thing applies to how we handle spell casting, where it's more of a, instead of a set MP cost, and of course I was going to use MP. What did you think I was going to use the spells per day model? I already told you before I went live, I've hated that model my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah.
But instead, it's more of you spend a couple MP as a buy-in, you do a casting roll. The rank of the spell, which a lot of spells have variable ranks between 1 to 9, determines the target number you're trying to roll for. If you miss, you can take a third of what you rolled and try again on your next turn. You can spend MP to boost that roll. So technically speaking, yes, you could burn through a bunch of MP to guarantee you get that roll, but you just burned through a bunch of MP in doing that.
Right.
And while you can get MP back through consumables, your slots for consumables is limited, and each consumable can only be used once per encounter. So it's one of those things where you can't I won't say you can't go full Nova, but if you go full Nova or full Alpha Strike, if you're familiar with BattleTech, it comes with a cost.
Right.
And I've seen cases of people blowing through their MP to guarantee that one spell and end up contributing to a party wipe because they don't have any more MP to support the rest of the party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Nuovarden, it's your primacy, so there's no limitation on your ability to manifest.
Mm-hmm.
You can manifest all day long. If you run out of primacy, you cannot do anything about your roll. Primacy allows you to change one of your dice roll up or down. Without it, you're just taking the roll, and there's a lot of hazard in trying to manifest, tapping into that energy like we were talking about earlier, trying to hit that fire hose, and you've got no way to mitigate that rush.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where,
And if I recall correctly, when manifesting, you do run the risk of a backlash if you roll poorly.
Right. Yeah, called reprisal. Yep.
And I suppose this makes the choice of a 25% rate when it comes to potential results all the more important, since that storage swings both ways.
Right, right. What I wanted the player to feel like they could do more than one thing if they wanted to. But at lower levels especially, you're not going to just go out and succeed at everything you're trying to do. And if you want to multitask,
Mhm.
you're really taking a risk. Taking a risk of failure, potential risk of reprisal, and you're just not strong enough. And so it simulates that growth, and it takes a while. I mean, in Nuovarden, the biggest that your dice cache can be is 4 dice. And you only have 2 action options. So you have other options to use your dice. You can hold your dice for assist and some other things like that are, detailed in the mechanics. But on your turn, you've only got a maximum of 2 actions, and at your most powerful, 4 dice. So that's when you're strongest. But until you get to that point, you're making choices on your economy. How, where do I want to apply the limited dice that I have? And even when you get to your maximum power, you're not so powerful that you can double die action, and hold dice to assist and all this kind of stuff. It doesn't get too crazy. It's like you're still not immortal.
Yeah, and on a whim, I decided to load up any dice and see what the common output is for just 2d4, since that's the most common roll that you're going to be doing. Obviously, it would be tricky to translate this to Nuovarden, which isn't using a sum.
Right.
And and the way any dice works, I couldn't do Nuovarden's system straight out. But the most common result with a percentile of 25 is a 5.
Okay. On 2 4-sided dice.
Yep.
So you're talking a 4-1 or a 3-2.
Either.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make that distinction. It's just concerned with the sum.
Right. But that's the only way you can get a 5 is either a 3-2 or a 4-1.
Yeah. And as far as the percentile of getting double 4s, 6.25.
Oh, really? It's only 6.25%?
Yeah, 6.25% to
Wow.
getting double 1s or double 4s.
Well, that's cool because that makes that high success feel exciting. But at the same time, with the meta currency of primacy, that increases your percentage quite a bit. So with a 3-2 or a 4-1 and primacy, you're going to succeed.
But I'd imagine the drawback is you have to be careful with that, so you don't end up. You have to be careful. I was gonna say you have to be careful with how you're spending primacy, since you're only gonna have so much of that.
Right.
And
right. Yeah.
Is it a case where primacy is not the easiest to get back?
There are a couple of things. So primacy restores after your rest. There are certain consumables that will restore your primacy, like they will restore healing. And then at the midpoint of evolution, you get a once per phase or day ability to restore your primacy pool to its maximum from wherever it's at. So essentially doubling your primacy for that phase. But at the same time, you're spending it to change your die rolls. You're spending it even more to re-roll. And then there are certain environmental and creature effects that will draw it out of you as well. So it is something that, you have to keep an eye on it. And if you're playing a martial type, then you're probably not building your primacy pool as fast as you're building your injury scale because you're the front line.
Yeah.
So your resource pool is not going to be huge. I think at maximum evolution, if you put every bonus point in primacy, your pool is only 23 points. So if you're spending it in a couple of battles and you're re-rolling dice at the cost of 2 to 4 primacy each re-roll, and something in the environment's taking it away, you still have some tracking to do.
Still some tracking to do, and I could see that getting eaten up very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I will admit the approach that I did with MP, because I could see some people saying, doesn't that mean that people could burn through very fast? They could, but at that point it's a player decision. Like if you burn through it, it's your own damn fault because
Yeah,
you took that risk.
exactly.
And when you take a risk, it can either be in your favor or it can blow up in your face.
Yeah.
I
mean, this is the point of player agency. You want agents. We want agency as players.
Mm-hmm.
So go ham, make your decisions, use your resources, do whatever you want. But there are limits.
There are limits and there are consequences.
Exactly.
And because of that, and Riona in the chat asks, so primacy is a little like a very fluid and active version of World of Darkness willpower. I would say yes. You are not nearly as restricted in terms of primacy use as you are with willpower, but that also means that if you burn through it because you used it too liberally, it's your own damn fault.
Yeah, and then you're just left with naked manifestation. You get what you get.
As we've established with naked manifestation, it means you can pull it off, but if the dice gods are not in your favor, you are going to be in for pain.
Right.
Which I certainly enjoyed that. I remember talking with Chris of Flux Destiny fame, and he had brought up that when it comes to power systems, the thing that defines them, that makes them interesting, is their limitations.
Right.
And I mentioned the whole Perils of the Warp thing with Warhammer, or the fact that you have to roll for your spells in Legend of the Five Rings, or any number of that sort of thing, where there's always some sort of catch, even in various fictions. The concept of needing certain items or certain focuses in order to use magic, which for some cases it's just tradition. I remember having to try and answer that for in one of my fantasy campaigns, and I basically said that a wizard's staff is equal parts a magic energy lightning rod and batter. In one of my more Magipunk campaigns, I had created a device called the Magi, which was an acronym for Magic Arts Guidance Interface. It looked like a PDA with extra steps.
Mm-hmm.
I know one might say, why didn't it look like a cell phone? This was 2002. Smartphones weren't a thing.
Yeah.
PDAs were goddamn everywhere, and and because of that, the idea was that it was a guidance to help get one through the mental hoops, but it meant that spells were essentially programs that you'd put into the thing, and sometimes they'd be one-offs to the point where you'd use the thing, the program would literally burn out.
Mm-hmm.
So now you've got a smoking chip inside the thing you got to get rid of.
Right.
Or some of the more expensive ones were more reliable. As a way to ground those kind of systems. But
exactly.
And I will note because of that. Just going with what I have with the spells in Legend Edition. There is an alternative, which is innate types of casting, which instead of having to do that buy-in and declare what level you're casting at, you're rolling a straight d20, and that's determining the level that you're casting. It doesn't cost
Oh,
as much.
cool.
It's a little more cost effective, but you also have less control over it.
Right. This is what you use in Legend.
Yeah,
Nice.
and things like ninjutsu as well as blue magic are all under that innate, and because of that, they usually don't go higher up. They don't go higher up in rank than 6, since the pattern with the target number for spellcasting ranks is the rank of the spell times 3. And
Gotcha.
it's a little hard to roll 27 on a d20.
Yeah.
But spellcasting and martial have a bit of a dichotomy of spellcasting can certainly do a lot of damage potentially, but it requires having faith in the dice gods, which you know as well as I. That's not the best thing to do.
They tell a good story.
Well,
It's not always the outcome you're looking for.
yeah. I think you and I have both had cases where somebody's like, this is a low DC. This will be an easy roll, and then they botch.
Right. Yes.
Or
I had a whole character that did that for an entire campaign.
yeah, or that one person who nobody lets touch their dice because everybody's convinced that he's cursed.
The Will Wheatonism.
Yeah. I'd say I bring that up too, but he still has me blocked for the fact that I kept calling him Wesley.
Oh no.
It's like, doesn't matter what you do, you will always be Wesley. You may as well own it. He was popping off about something, and I immediately replied, "Shut up, Wesley." Look, I hold these truths to be self-evident that all are cremated equal. But
Yeah, right.
I will note one of the things that I did that's gotten a bit of a stir is not going with a grid combat approach and going with a front and back row.
Yeah, I saw that. It was interesting.
There's a few reasons why I did it. It wasn't done on a whim. There's method to my madness. There's just a lot of madness. First off, emulating the source material, since the only games that use a grid combat setup are the tactics games, and you have more open movement with some of the more action-based entries, but obviously I wasn't going to do that. The other reason was in freeing up the space that I would have used grid combat for and had to deal with all the intricacies of that. I was able to use that space to do other things. But I didn't want to go full theater of the mind because I felt that was too abstract for what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the row system was a nice middle ground between the two extremes on that pendulum.
Yeah, I've not seen that before.
Yeah. That, and I was going through games like the One Ring and Rollmaster, or rather against the Dark Master, which have kind of a ranked system, which is similar to rows, where it has where combat is more of phases on those rows instead of on initiative. I still have it on initiative just because I wanted to keep some things familiar, and some things less so.
Right.
But there was one of the reason, and this is something that I think a lot of people haven't addressed when it comes to grid combat. I did a tweet about this a while back, but I may as well reiterate this. And I'm going to be committing nerd blasphemy by bringing up sports. So then again, I've already committed nerd blasphemy to some by drawing upon video games for some of my design principles, especially drawing upon shooters. And the example that I used is the way formations work in the NFL versus the CFL, i.e. the football up in Canada.
Right.
NFL formations are very tight and focused largely on defense, not far removed from formations you might see in rugby, which is why the brotherly shove was so effective, I'd say. I know it's banned now in the name of player safety, but to that I say still an
Did
issue.
did they actually ban it? I didn't
Yeah,
think they did.
I think they
Oh,
banned it because some salty ass coaches were thinking that that was the reason the Eagles won was because they had that option. But
yeah. I mean, nobody can stop it.
you you have a strong enough you have a strong enough line and you can stop it, and it's only really useful for getting 1 yard. So it seems
Yeah,
like this
yeah.
auto win thing, but it's got a ton of drawbacks. And in the CFL, you have a gap of a few yards between offense and defense when it comes to the line of scrimmage, and you have more spread out formations to encourage more gunslinging plays. Those long range go deep kind of plays.
Yeah.
Which is often why you see more scoring in CFL games.
You have a bigger field too.
Yeah, you got a slightly bigger field. You do have that weird thing of the goalpost being in front of the end zone, which has led to a few unfortunate incidents.
That's why they moved it to the back in the NFL.
Yeah, that's why you wear the helmets.
Right.
But I've seen people do runs not realizing how fast they were going and hit that thing. But where I bring this into grid combat is, in the earliest forms, grid combat was built for dungeon crawling, which was going to mean tight corridors and not a lot of room to move. But as time has gone on, you've seen more and more set piece style encounters and battle areas and whatnot that are built more like the set for like a film.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that, but the problem is the movement economy has not adapted to that,
Mm-hmm.
which has resulted in some tactics like hovering your friend, or even flanking, a little bit less used because the temptation is to spread out for the party.
Right.
And I've felt that if you're going to be doing a grid combat approach, going with that, I feel like the movement economy should decide whether or not it's accommodating one or the other. And since I was going for a more setting agnostic affair, that's not something I can account for, because how big or small the encounters are is not up to me. Even when there's been the question of a balanced encounter, I've always said I can't do the balanced encounter question in that way because there's too many moving parts. I don't have a challenge rating. If you look in the bestiary, you'll see that the individual monsters have sliding stats for different levels.
Sensibly. I'm just looking at your row chart here, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Obviously, it was also a means to make your choice of weapon matter more than just because in a lot of cases your choice of weapon only matters in terms of range bands and damage dice.
Well, in Nuovarden, it doesn't even matter that. In Nuovarden, it's there's your distance weapons.
Mm-hmm.
You've got two-handed weapons, which offer effectively a reach.
Right.
And then you've got a few weapons.
Say again, you cut out. Ty, you there? Ty? Hold on, folks.
Check.
Ah, there we go.
Oh, did I come back? I
Yeah.
don't know. I didn't hear anything on my side. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
I was saying that in Nuovarden, you've got your two-handed weapons, which have essentially a reach effect. You've got a few weapons like the bola that might immobilize a stat, have a stat effect. But the damage base for Nuovarden is 4 at D4. Everything is based on 4s,
Yep.
because your hit points, if you will, your injury scale is not huge, and so combat feels more risky. So I think that's similar. There's a similar attempt to what you're doing with having not a standardized weapon thing. I just didn't go with the variable damage die either, but I did go with damage factor, which is a static bonus of a various range according to monster size or status, like an empowered effect on a weapon or an empowered effect on the body, something like that, where you can incrementally increase damage to add to your result.
Yeah, so you're going a bit more abstract than I am, admittedly.
Yeah, or more. It's more. It's not exactly static, but what I think it does is it makes combat feel like a fight, not a pissing match of power. I don't know how else to say it. Like my sword's bigger than yours. That is less of a factor in Nuovarden. It's more about you just got hit with a blade and that really hurt. And I don't care if the blade is 6 inches long or 12 inches long. You don't want to get stabbed. And then if there's some power behind it and it's been boosted in some way, then you're really dealing with a variable, which makes it exciting. But it's still it's part of that, the whole reason why I created the D4 system in the first place, and that was to keep those mechanics tight and let the narrative flourish.
And I can certainly see that. Now, I think one of the other things is, as you no doubt saw with the jobs that I have, I did put in limit break, but I didn't do the gauge of effect kind of thing, because you're already going to be tracking enough resources as is. I didn't feel like adding a limit break gauge for that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since other games in the same line have done that kind of thing, and a lot of them are just souped up versions of attacks, and that just wasn't interesting to me. So instead, I had limit breaks as a kind of cheat that you can use when you're below half health.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't give you some new thing. It just does what that particular job or that particular class is already going to be doing, just better.
Right.
For example, action surge, which is the limit break for the warrior. For the rest of the encounter, you can make one weapon attack per round without using your action.
Gotcha. Send you a free action attack option.
Originally, I had thought about having it that you do 2 attacks with each one, but I was like, nah, I don't want to fall into the same trap that L5R 3rd edition did, which they fixed in 4th, where in 3rd edition, a lot of the higher tier Bushi schools could do 2 weapon attacks per turn. In 4th edition, they changed it to your first weapon attack is treated as a minor action instead of your major action.
Okay.
And the reason they did that was to allow for other combo potentials.
That's interesting because, as I think we were discussing before we got on mic, and as we've discussed before, no, I actually think we were discussing. Anyway, you've got your action economy in Nuovarden is you've got 2 actions if you want to use them, but you have to have an associated die.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've only got 2 dice, then, that's your limit. But if you want to take 2 actions with 1 die each and essentially a 25, maybe 50% chance to succeed, you go for it. Go for it. And then that way I'm not trying, the system isn't trying to police the action economy to the degree that the player doesn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Such as in single action systems.
Yeah. You do have Legend Edition is single action, but because of the fact that you don't have to deal with movement or anything like that, it goes a lot the single action goes a lot faster.
Yeah, and that is a benefit of a single action thing. As opposed to something like 5e where you've got single action plus bonus action plus reaction, and those sorts of things for certain builds can take a long time to wade through.
Yeah, and I haven't been a fan of how over reliant it is on the whole bonus action thing. I remember going through what was a hack of 5e that became something called Heavens and Heresies, and a lot of those bonus actions were cases of originally it was you were spending your movement to do those extra actions, and then he just dropped the pretense and made a whole AP system, and everything is spent on AP. And from what it sounds, die cash is kind of an AP system, but not in the typical sense.
Yeah, Nuovarden's very much, or the fortune system is very much a resource-based system. So you have your dice cast resource, you have your injury scale, which is a natural resource of points of health. You've got your primacy, which is meta currency. And that was.
I always refer to stuff like primacy in this case as extra effort, since some people are really hung up on the presence of meta currency. I've seen people outright refuse to run certain games because it has some meta-narrative currency as determines, and it always seems kind of silly.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a matter of preference. So people don't like it, they don't like it.
Which preference is one thing, but I'd prefer if people were just honest and say personal preference instead of trying to go with this long-winded attempt to justify that doesn't hold up under scrutiny.
Which sounds like sort of an old school mentality of back in my day.
Yeah.
Back in my day, we actually used our 10-foot pole.
Yeah, and whenever it comes, I had resolved when I started GMing and started running things, and then later on, I never wanted to be that guy who was always about back in his day.
Yeah.
And to that end, I have pointed out things from those days that people gloss over. That I'm like, no, these things were dumb ideas, and there's a reason they didn't stick around. I've seen some people defend Thaco, and I've said Thaco was fine, just presented terribly. And you'll notice that most games do not try and do the aim high and aim low in the same rule set.
Right.
There's exceptions, obviously, but for the most,
there was a time when that's all we had, and that's what we knew, and so there's nostalgia there for,
But
like I was the first.
A sweet poison.
Sure. Well, yeah, if it limits your view or your vision, for sure.
Yeah. And that kind of sweet poison is downstream from another mantra of mine, which is designed by gospel.
I like that.
We do things a certain way because we've always done things a certain way, because that's the way to be done as dictated by on high. Okay,
it's the old story.
I'm being semi-sarcastic with that,
but it's the old story of Mom always used to cut a third off the roast and throw it away before she put it in the oven, and we finally figured out that the reason why she did that is because Grandma's pan used to be smaller.
Yeah.
So we're just you have to think about why we do things.
Have you ever seen the film Moneyball?
Yes.
Yeah, what instantly comes to mind with that whole design by gospel thing is the one scout that is resistant to the more math-based direction of the Oakland A's. It's
Yeah.
basically the like of basically having the attitude of, oh, the intangibles thing has been how baseball has worked for over 100 years, so why would we change it?
Right. Yeah. I just go with my gut instead of
Yeah.
crunch the numbers and figure out there's a formula here. Yeah.
They're using intangibles to try and replace three of their top players that they lost to bigger teams.
Right.
And the big message in that scene is the way we've been doing things isn't working. We were at dead last year. We need to do something different, or we're going to be dead last again this year, and we're not getting more money. So we've got to work with what we've got.
Well, necessity is the mother of invention, to quote another axiom.
Yeah. So is getting caught.
Yeah.
And there's always a way around these sort of things. But when I will admit, with a lot of what I do, there's a healthy amount of abstraction, but that was in part due to the fact that one particular thing that I think game designers should re-examine that has been that design by gospel is trying to do real world simulation. That's very much a mindset that was born out of the wargaming scene.
Mm-hmm.
Since tabletop RPGs were born out of the wargaming scene in the 70s. But a lot of those war games were focused on originally historical battles. Whether it be World War II battles, whether it be battles in the Napoleonic era, but simulating large-scale battles and having a lot of history buffs run those kind of games. This is also where you get some of the infamous monster games from the late 70s, things like the Campaign for North Africa, which I will always throw that at somebody whenever someone says that a game nowadays is too complicated.
Right.
Have you seen the board for that thing?
I just recently saw an article about the most time-consuming games ever created, and I think that was number one.
Yeah. The board is 9 feet long. There's an infamous image of somebody's kid laying next to the thing, and it's like size and a half of said kid.
They reach the middle of that thing.
Yeah, pretty much. Like in some cases, the board requires more than one table.
Yeah.
And I did find the image, so I'll send that to you. This is the infamous image that's been used as a meme regarding the game for years.
Oh yeah. That kind of looks like the old Gamma World map.
Yeah, it came out in the late 70s. The company that made it went belly up about a year later. And imagine the way I describe the scale of it is imagine your D&D campaign or whatever fantasy game campaign with that same level of individual detail, but with a campaign map the size of the campaign map of a 4X game. But still keeping the individual detail. Now, for somebody's homebrew thing, that sounds like a dream. But for anybody else, it is not a dream. It is an absolute nightmare.
Especially today, I don't think today's culture can handle wants that level of detail. Honestly, there's no time for it. Everybody's too busy.
I'd say it's. For me, I don't think it's an issue of time. It's an issue of getting to where the fun factor actually is, instead of having things just as a flex.
Oh yeah.
Like I think of one of my big whipping boys of TTRPGs from the 90s is everything that was made by Fantasy Games Unlimited. And a lot of their games were notorious for having these long, long, long skill lists that were downright offensive. And only a dozen of those skills would actually get regular use. And a lot of them were just there for its own sake, or so situational you could go through entire campaigns and not use them. And
yeah, that's
the same applies with certain games that have that have this sort of skill bloat, even in more recent affairs, like say, your Pathfinders and the like, where knowledge subjects are each individual skills, or crafting subjects are each individual skills.
Yeah. Skill trees and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. In fact, that's why I have knowledge as this unified thing that if you have a specialization in certain knowledges, you get a bonus for, but I didn't want to do the individual skills thing.
Right. Me either.
Knowledge is just a special type of skill roll that you can get certain tags in the form of interests, whether these be studies, i.e. things that you've studied, or affiliations, my version of alignments, or languages. And if you've got one of those tags that applies, you get a bonus to the roll. That's it. But all of those studies combine along with one of your stats to create the knowledge roll.
Right.
So instead of rolling, say, knowledge, religion, you just roll knowledge, and if you happen to have a religion tag, then you're going to be doing better at that roll.
Got it. Yeah.
Trim.
Simplify.
Yeah. I remember somebody looking at the way I handle different types of damage and different damage modifications and saying, this doesn't seem like you're trying to simplify things. And, well, I wasn't. I was trying to trim what I was trying to do was trim the fat, but I wasn't trying to simplify, per se.
Just drop the bloat and keep some of the crunch.
Yeah. I remember when I would play third edition, and I would try and fuse several of these skills into one combined one. Like, for example, run, jump, and swim. I didn't see a reason why those had to be 3 different skills. Plus, as an athlete, if you're good at running, you're going to be reasonably good at doing a horizontal jump.
Right.
And at the end of the day, you're still using your. It's still a difference of aerobic and anaerobic exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Which is
essentially body.
My acrobatics and athletics has kind of been the result of that fusion over the years.
Yeah.
One's more agility, one's more strength. But
right.
And things like use rope that's one of my whipping points when it comes to why is this its own skill. The only time I could see somebody needing to have that as an individual skill is, I don't know, a contortionist.
Maybe for making complex knots. I don't know.
Yeah, but you think that would just be simple dexterity.
I mean, I guess I don't know how to make a knot beyond a granny knot, honestly, but there are a lot of complex knots that a person can make. So
yeah.
maybe the skill would be knot making. I don't know, but just the idea of throwing a rope over a ledge and halfway decently tying it off on something is not a whole skill.
Yeah, it would be like saying tying your shoes is a skill.
Right. Right. Use lace.
Mm-hmm. Granted, I hate shoelaces in general, but that's because I have the worst luck with them, where they keep falling off every few minutes. But with that said, now that New Verdun is out, it sounds like you had hinted at this earlier, but it sounds like you're planning on doing something with its fortune system, but in a more modern setting. Are you trying to go? Are you trying to go full grounded, or are you trying to go like modern action movie with that approach?
I'm going with investigative horror.
All right.
So completely different from Nuovarden, which is a mythical, mystical,
Yeah.
lore-based setting. I'm taking lore a different direction, and I'm going with a much more modern, um, cryptid investigation, X-Files kind of
So
thing.
kind of in the
I
vein of like X Files, Fringe, Warehouse 13, that kind of thing.
Right, yeah. Delta Green, is a game but I'm not going with the Cthulhu mythos. I am fascinated by modern or by actual ufology lore and a little bit of the cryptid stuff, which there's potentially some overlap there. Um, and there's so much, uh, whether a person believes that these things exist or not, there's so much information of historic sightings and reporting and rumors and all this kind of stuff. Area 51 to to all kinds of the
Given,
Manhattan Project and all
yeah.
kinds of things.
Given that, I'd like to posit a bit of a question. Would you consider
Yeah,
the Beast of Jebudon a early example of what we now call cryptids?
I don't know the story of that creature.
The Beast of Jebudon was this supposed monster that was terrorizing the Jebudon region in medieval
Okay.
France.
Hmm.
It was described as this large wolf with red and black fur in places, um, and supposedly it was killed by someone. Though the accounting of that has been called into question over the years.
Right,
It's more likely that the beast was just a pack of wolves, since wolf attacks were a problem at that time.
right.
Um,
Yeah, but the legend of that creature would definitely be a cryptid.
yeah, and it certainly has created its own legend. There's some of it was played with the film Brotherhood of the Wolf.
Okay, that's a good movie.
Yeah, really good movie. I've referenced it a bunch. I've referenced it a bunch of times, and it is it is one. I'd say because of that mythos, it certainly has that cryptid motif, even though the term cryptid is a far more recent term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, but we've got there's a vast library of cryptids around the world. Obviously Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the Loch Ness Monster, the Mothman, vampires, werewolves, ghosts, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
But I am particularly interested in theories of extraterrestrial, intraterrestrial entities and that kind of lights in the sky and all that kind of stuff too. It's just all very curious.
yeah,
When our own government says we don't know what they are, but they exist, we have to think, well, if nothing else, let's gamify that stuff.
yeah. I mean, we did get a Men in Black RPG a long time ago,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I've run that a fair few times, and what I think a lot of people end up forgetting is that the Men in Black in the movies are technically an independent body.
right.
Like,
According to the lore, you mean?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, are they government? Are they shadow government? Are they aliens? What are they? Yeah.
in the first movie, that outright's answered when you get that first visit to HQ, and Kay is like, no, we don't answer to them. We don't answer to them. They ask too many questions. And
uh,
given how they go so far out of their way to make sure nobody knows they exist, to the point of whole neuralizer thing.
Yeah.
It would make perfect sense that they would not answer to anyone.
Right.
Um, Especially given
Yeah.
that their whole thing is making sure that Earth remains a neutral political zone.
Right. And I think that there are some, like the Men in Black franchise, like Triangle Society is a game that I recently learned about.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I interviewed about that.
okay.
And
The thing that the thing that I'm interested in, though, is a more serious tone. Like, I think there's a lot of laughing about it. And I think that popular media has, well, I want to play with the conspiracy theories, and I want to play with the sorts of things that people are saying right now in the popular media or even the fringe media, about how, even that uh, making the topic funny and awkward is just it's an operation to keep us off guard.
yeah, I could see that. And a big reason for the more tongue-in-cheek approach that Triangle Agency is going for is one of its inspirations being Control.
Mm.
Control is a game by Remedy. I won't say it's the best out of Remedy's output, but it's the first game in a while that felt like a Remedy game, because they
Gotcha.
they like to put in their moments of serious, but also their moments of absurd. Like the first Max Payne game outright referenced an infamous Buster Keaton skit scene. The
Nice.
whole falling wall, but you don't get crushed because they're the convenient hole kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a famous spot by Keaton.
I will say I've heard really good things about Triangle Society, so
Yeah.
that it sounds like a fun system.
And well, much like yours, it's using D4s exclusively. And
Right. Yeah.
But I think another potential, I don't know if I'd call this a cryptid, but it's cryptid adjacent, is the phenomenon of liminal spaces that has cropped up in the last few years.
Yeah, just that term is a very contemporary term.
And
yeah,
we have had a horror of games and media that play around with that concept of these liminal spaces there, because it's some sort of dimensional encroachment or something just not right compared to the rest of the world.
Yeah, Old Gods of Appalachia.
Yeah, you look at a liminal space, and it definitely just there's something that always looks very off about it. Something not right, even though it's a natural place.
Or the level of the uncanny valley.
I'm not sure if it's an uncanny valley, because there's no modification. It's just a photograph. But there's something that doesn't seem right. Like just as an example, and a lot of times it's a case of tricks of light in a natural area, but this is an example of a liminal space I just sent you.
Okay. Yeah, like is that a mirror involved in there, or what are all those compartments, those doorways? Yeah.
And
yeah, it's sort of a trick of the eye kind of.
Pretty much. And I think the reason it became a thing is more as people doing urban exploration, exploring abandoned buildings and the like, or buildings that have been reclaimed by nature, especially like really old abandoned malls.
Yeah, it just has a feeling to it that is not quite. It doesn't belong to us anymore. Yeah.
It's, and I've seen some people repurpose those kind of abandoned malls or the like to use as dungeons.
Oh yeah.
But it goes back to a common thing within horror, part of the appeal factor with horror is you are in a place that you should not be.
Right.
In a film, if you're saying to the screen, "Don't go in there, you're going to get killed," that's the film doing its job. With a game, it's the fact that you yourself are having to force yourself into going into those places.
Right. Exactly.
But I'll certainly keep an eye out for. Obviously, it's gonna be quite some time before that project becomes a thing. But will it be a case of the PCs are independent investigators or working for an organization, or are you leaving that up to interpretation?
Similar to the way the fortune system uses cultures, I will have character types or archetypes, such as your, FBI is a classic for the genre. The scientist, the politician kind of thing, where there are roles that people hold within society where there are not necessarily, they're not gatekeepers, but they hold the knowledge, whether they're law enforcement or they are educators or civic leaders, something like that, so that when something's going down that is behind the scenes to the day-to-day, where your soccer mom doesn't know, your construction worker's not involved, your average Joe is not really aware, or if they're hearing something on the news or whatever, they're not paying too much attention to it because it's just so far beyond their purview of the need to survive. But there are those that get pulled into it that have to follow through, and so they are the ones that would somehow be involved and working together to solve this sort of thing, which kind of follows the horror genre in some ways, or at least like Cthulhu, where it's different members of community are coming together to solve this mystery.
Yeah, I can certainly get that, and I'll look forward to seeing how that develops. But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time to come all the way to my monastery and enjoy the madness that happens here.
Thank you.
And anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
You're here.
And of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
Thank you. 신기 낸내 버리시 감대오 나의 그리움